Number 100 Facts About the Human Brain, Extended Sleep Story. Hello there, and welcome to Cosmic Sleep Stories. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Maybe you've always been curious about the mysterious organ inside your skull, that 3-pound universe that creates your entire experience of reality. Or perhaps you simply need a quiet place to rest your thoughts at the end of a long day. Either way, you're exactly where you need to be. You can rest now. Tonight, you have nothing to do but let go. Let your breathing slow, steady, and deep, each breath nourishing the billions of cells in your brain that have been working tirelessly all day. Let your body relax completely, trusting the automatic systems that keep you alive without any conscious effort. Let your mind drift inward, turning attention toward itself, the strange loop of consciousness observing consciousness, the brain contemplating the brain. Over the next hour and more, we'll explore together 100 gentle truths about the most complex object in the known universe, your brain. We'll journey through its structures, from the ancient reptilian core to the newest regions of the cortex. We'll discover how thoughts form, how memories are stored, how emotions arise, how consciousness emerges from mere matter. Some facts will fascinate you. Others will simply wash over you like neural signals across synapses, leaving only soft impressions as you drift towards sleep. And that's perfectly fine. Your brain will process it all, filing away what matters, letting the rest fade into the comfortable darkness of forgetting. There's no need to remember every detail. There's no test tomorrow. Just let the words flow through your mind like thoughts themselves, temporary patterns of activation that arise and dissolve, leaving only a sense of wonder at the magnificent biological computer you carry with you always, the one currently listening to these words, making sense of sounds, creating meaning from vibrations in air, generating the entire world of your experience. And before we begin our journey through the labyrinth of neurons, if these quiet explorations help you unwind, if they give your restless mind something calm and fascinating to focus on as you drift towards sleep, consider subscribing to Cosmic Sleep Stories. It helps others find this peaceful corner of knowledge, one sleepy mind at a time. Now, close your eyes if you'd like. Breathe slowly, feeling your chest rise and fall, feeling the air moving in and out of your lungs, processed by the autonomic systems your brain controls without you ever having to think about it. And feel grateful, just for a moment, for the brain that makes all of this possible. The breathing, the feeling, the listening, the thinking, the gradual dissolution of consciousness into the peaceful darkness of sleep. Let's begin our journey through the universe inside your head. Your brain weighs approximately 1.4 kilograms, about 3 pounds, roughly 2% of your total body weight. It doesn't seem like much, does it? You could hold a brain in your hands, if you had one to hold, feeling its soft, delicate texture, its surprising lightness. It's not particularly large as animal brains go. Elephants have brains weighing over 5 kilograms, 3 times larger than yours. Whale brains can exceed 7 kilograms, 5 times the human average. But size, as it turns out, isn't everything. What matters is not the total mass, but the density of connections, the complexity of organization, the emergent properties that arise from billions of neurons working together in exquisitely coordinated patterns. And your brain has approximately 86 billion neurons. Let that number settle in your mind for a moment. 86 billion. That's more than 10 times the number of humans currently alive on Earth, more than the number of stars in the Milky Way galaxy, all packed into the space of a large grapefruit, all crammed inside your skull right now as you listen to these words. Each of these neurons is not a simple on-off switch, but a sophisticated cell with complex internal machinery, capable of receiving inputs from thousands of other neurons and sending outputs to thousands more. Each neuron can connect to other neurons through structures called synapses, and the average neuron makes about 7,000 synaptic connections. This means your brain contains somewhere around 600 trillion synapses, 600 trillion connection points where information flows from one neuron to another, creating a network so vast, so intricate, that the number of possible connection patterns, the number of different states your brain could theoretically occupy, exceeds the number of atoms in the entire observable universe. Think about that for a moment. The number of possible configurations of your brain, the number of different patterns of neural activation, is larger than the number of particles in all the galaxies, all the stars, all the planets that exist in all of space. You carry infinity in your skull. You are, in a very real and profound sense, more complex than the cosmos itself. The universe may be vast in space, but your brain is vast in possibility, in the sheer number of states it can occupy, the thoughts it can think, the experiences it can create. Your brain consumes about 20% of your body's total energy expenditure, even though it's only 2% of your weight. This is remarkable. No other organ requires such a disproportionate share of resources. Your brain burns through glucose and oxygen at an astonishing rate, particularly when you're thinking hard, learning something new, solving complex problems, or engaging in intense concentration. A chess grandmaster playing a tournament match can burn as many calories sitting still, just thinking, as someone doing moderate physical exercise. But even at rest, even in deep sleep when you're not consciously thinking about anything, your brain remains incredibly active, using almost as much energy as when you're awake. It's processing memories during sleep, consolidating the day's learning, pruning unnecessary synaptic connections, strengthening important ones, clearing out metabolic waste products that accumulated during waking hours, maintaining the basic physiological functions that keep you alive: breathing, circulation, temperature regulation, hormone secretion, all of it managed by your brain without any conscious awareness or effort on your part. The brain is divided into two hemispheres, left and right, mirror images of each other, connected by a thick bundle of nerve fibers called the corpus callosum. This structure contains approximately 200 million axons, nerve fibers carrying signals back and forth between the hemispheres, allowing them to communicate and coordinate their activities. For a long time, people believed the left hemisphere was logical and analytical, while the right hemisphere was creative and intuitive. This idea has become deeply embedded in popular culture, but it's an oversimplification, almost a myth. Both hemispheres are involved in almost everything you do. Creativity requires logic. Analysis benefits from intuition. Language, traditionally thought of as purely left hemisphere, actually involves both hemispheres working together, the left more involved in grammar and syntax, the right more involved in prosody and emotional tone. Mathematics, supposedly the most logical pursuit, activates regions throughout both hemispheres. The two halves of your brain are not separate personalities, but intimate partners, constantly collaborating, each bringing different but complementary processing styles to bear on whatever you're doing. Though the left hemisphere is, in most people, dominant for language production and comprehension. If you're right-handed, there's about a 95% chance your language centers are in the left hemisphere. If you're left-handed, the percentage drops to about 70%, with some left-handers having language in the right hemisphere or distributed across both. This hemispheric specialization for language is one of the most distinctive features of human brains, visible even in the physical structure, where language areas in the left hemisphere are typically larger than their counterparts on the right. The outer layer of the brain, the cerebral cortex, is what makes humans truly distinctive among animals. It's a thin sheet of neural tissue, only about 2 to 4 millimeters thick, less than a quarter of an inch, but it's extensively folded and convoluted, creating gyri, those ridge-like bulges, and sulci, the groove-like indentations, that give the brain its characteristic wrinkled appearance. This folding dramatically increases the cortex's surface area, allowing more neural tissue to fit inside the confines of the skull. If you could carefully unfold and flatten the entire cortex, smoothing out all the wrinkles and folds, it would cover approximately 2,500 square centimeters, roughly the size of a large cloth napkin or a small tablecloth. All of that computational power, all of that information processing capacity, folded up and packed into your skull, creating the substrate for everything that makes you human. This cortex is where the highest level processing happens. Language production and comprehension, abstract thought and reasoning, long-term planning and delayed gratification, imagination and creativity, self-awareness and metacognition, moral reasoning and empathy, all the sophisticated cognitive abilities that distinguish humans from other animals. The cortex is the newest part of the brain in evolutionary terms, the part that expanded most dramatically as our ancestors evolved from ape-like primates into modern humans over the past few million years. But beneath the cortex lie older structures, ancient parts of the brain we share with other mammals, with reptiles, with all vertebrates going back hundreds of millions of years in evolutionary history. The brainstem, at the base of the brain where it connects to the spinal cord, controls the most basic life functions: breathing, heart rate, blood pressure, swallowing, digestion, sleep-wake cycles. Damage to the brainstem is often fatal because these functions are so fundamental to survival. The cerebellum, Latin for little brain, sits at the back of the skull beneath the cortex. For a long time, scientists thought it was only involved in motor control and balance, and indeed, people with cerebellar damage often have difficulty with coordination, walking with a staggering gait, having trouble with fine motor control. But recent research suggests the cerebellum does much more, involved in timing, in sequencing actions, possibly even in social cognition and emotional regulation. It contains more neurons than the rest of the brain combined, though they're much smaller neurons, and we're still discovering all the things it does. The limbic system, a collection of structures deep in the center of the brain, processes emotions and memories. The amygdala generates fear and anxiety. The hippocampus is crucial for forming new memories. The hypothalamus regulates hunger, thirst, body temperature, and hormone release. These structures are ancient, present in all mammals, the source of the emotional life we share with dogs and cats and elephants and whales, the feelings that color our experience, that motivate behavior, that make life feel meaningful rather than just a series of abstract calculations. Your brain is a palimpsest of evolutionary history, a document written and rewritten many times, with newer structures built on top of older ones, each layer adding new capabilities while retaining ancient functions that prove their worth across hundreds of millions of years of evolution. You are simultaneously a modern human, a mammal, a reptile, a fish, a worm, all the way back to the first nervous systems that emerged over 500 million years ago in the Cambrian seas. All of that history is present in your brain right now, active at this very moment, keeping you alive, keeping you aware, keeping you uniquely and irreplaceably you. And as you rest here, as your breathing slows and deepens, as your body settles into comfort and your mind begins to drift, your brain continues its work, monitoring every breath, every heartbeat, adjusting blood flow to maintain optimal brain temperature, processing sounds from your environment, determining which require attention and which can be ignored, generating the thoughts that drift through your mind like clouds across the sky of consciousness, managing thousands of processes simultaneously, effortlessly, without any conscious direction from you, leaving you free to simply be, to exist, to drift gently toward the peace of sleep. Let's zoom in now, descending from the scale of the whole brain down to the level of a single neuron, one cell among 86 billion, a single point in the vast network that creates your mind. A neuron is not like other cells in your body. It has a cell body, called the soma, containing the nucleus with its DNA, containing mitochondria that produce energy, containing all the molecular machinery needed to keep the cell alive and functioning. But extending from this central body are elaborate branches that give neurons their distinctive, tree-like appearance. Dendrites, typically numerous and highly branched, reach out from the cell body like the branches of a tree, creating an enormous surface area for receiving signals from other neurons. A single neuron can have dozens or even hundreds of dendritic branches, each covered with tiny protrusions called dendritic spines where synapses form. The dendrites are the input side of the neuron, the receivers, constantly sensing chemical signals from thousands of other neurons, integrating all that information, deciding whether to fire. And then there's the axon, usually a single long process extending from the cell body, sometimes branching near its end into multiple terminals. The axon is the output side, the transmitter, carrying electrical signals away from the cell body toward other neurons. Most axons are short, just a fraction of a millimeter, reaching only to nearby neurons. But some axons are extraordinarily long. Motor neurons in your spinal cord have axons that stretch all the way down to your toes, over a meter long in a tall person, among the longest cells in the entire body. These long axons are like biological wires, but they don't carry electricity the way metal wires do. Instead, they propagate electrical signals through a clever mechanism involving ions, charged particles like sodium and potassium that flow across the neuron's membrane through specialized protein channels. When a neuron fires, when it generates an action potential, sodium channels open, sodium ions rush into the cell, creating a wave of electrical charge that travels down the axon at speeds that can reach 120 meters per second in the fastest neurons, fast enough to cover the distance from brain to toe in less than 1/100th of a second. But here's something remarkable. Neurons don't actually touch each other. Between the axon terminal of one neuron and the dendrite of the next lies a tiny gap called the synaptic cleft, a space so small it's measured in nanometers, billionths of a meter. This gap is only about 20 to 40 nanometers wide, roughly 500 times smaller than the width of a human hair. It's almost nothing, nearly touching, but not quite, and that tiny gap changes everything. When an electrical signal, an action potential, reaches the end of an axon, it can't jump across the synaptic cleft. Electricity doesn't work that way. Instead, the arrival of the electrical signal triggers the release of chemical messengers called neurotransmitters. These molecules are stored in tiny bubbles called vesicles clustered at the axon terminal. When the action potential arrives, calcium channels open, calcium ions rush in, and this triggers the vesicles to fuse with the cell membrane, dumping their contents, thousands of neurotransmitter molecules, into the synaptic cleft. These neurotransmitter molecules diffuse across the narrow gap, a journey that takes less than a millisecond, and bind to receptor proteins embedded in the membrane of the receiving neuron. When enough receptors are activated, they trigger changes in the receiving neuron, opening ion channels, changing its electrical charge, influencing whether it will fire its own action potential and pass the signal onward. This is how neurons communicate, through an elegant combination of electricity within cells and chemistry between cells. The electrical signal travels rapidly down the axon, triggers chemical release at the synapse. The chemicals cross the tiny gap, bind to receptors on the next neuron, and trigger a new electrical signal that continues the chain. This happens billions upon billions of times every second throughout your brain, creating the patterns of activity that correspond to your thoughts, feelings, perceptions, memories, dreams, everything you experience. There are many different types of neurotransmitters, each with different effects, each contributing to the symphony of neural activity in different ways. Glutamate is the main excitatory neurotransmitter, the gas pedal of the brain, making neurons more likely to fire. It's involved in learning and memory, in neural plasticity, in the strengthening of synaptic connections that underlies all learning. Most of the synapses in your brain, perhaps 80 to 90%, use glutamate as their primary neurotransmitter. GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid, is the main inhibitory neurotransmitter, the brake pedal, making neurons less likely to fire. Inhibition is just as important as excitation. Without inhibition, neural activity would spiral out of control, neurons exciting other neurons in endless positive feedback loops, creating the uncontrolled firing patterns seen in epileptic seizures. The balance between excitation and inhibition is crucial, maintained by constant adjustment, constant feedback, the brain always seeking equilibrium. Other neurotransmitters modulate brain activity in more subtle, more nuanced ways. Dopamine is involved in reward and motivation, in the anticipation of pleasure, in movement control, in attention and focus. Too little dopamine causes Parkinson's disease, with its characteristic tremors and difficulty initiating movement. Too much or overactive dopamine signaling may contribute to schizophrenia and other psychotic disorders. Drugs of abuse, cocaine, amphetamines, even nicotine and alcohol, work largely by manipulating dopamine systems, creating artificial rewards, hijacking the circuitry that evolved to motivate adaptive behaviors. Serotonin affects mood, emotion, appetite, sleep, and many other functions. Low serotonin is associated with depression, which is why many antidepressant medications work by increasing serotonin availability in synapses. Norepinephrine influences attention, arousal, stress response, and fight-or-flight reactions. Acetylcholine is important for learning and memory, for muscle contraction, for the transition between sleep and waking. Endorphins, which are actually neuropeptides rather than simple neurotransmitters, reduce pain and create feelings of pleasure and euphoria, the runner's high, the relief after intense exercise. These chemicals don't determine your thoughts or feelings in any simple mechanical way. The relationship between neurochemistry and subjective experience is complex, emergent, not reducible to simple cause and effect. You are not just a bag of chemicals. But these molecules do influence the tone and character of your mental life, creating the emotional coloring that accompanies your thoughts, the general sense of well-being or distress that forms the background of consciousness, the subtle shifts in mood and motivation that you might not even consciously notice, but that profoundly shape your experience. And right now, as you relax deeper and deeper towards sleep, your brain's neurochemistry is shifting in systematic ways. Adenosine, a byproduct of neural activity, has been building up throughout the day, accumulating in your brain, binding to receptors, and making you feel increasingly sleepy. This is why caffeine works. It blocks adenosine receptors, preventing the sleepiness signal from getting through, creating the illusion of alertness even though the adenosine is still there, still accumulating. Melatonin, released by the pineal gland in response to darkness, is promoting sleep, preparing your body for rest. Activity in arousal systems fueled by norepinephrine and histamine is decreasing, the alert, vigilant state of daytime consciousness gradually giving way to the softer, quieter state that precedes sleep. The balance is shifting, tilting toward rest, toward the dissolution of waking consciousness, toward sleep. And you don't have to do anything to make this happen. Your brain manages it all automatically, responding to signals from your body and environment, orchestrating the complex biochemical transition from waking to sleeping without any conscious guidance from you. You just need to let it happen, to surrender to the natural process, to trust the ancient systems that have been putting animals to sleep for hundreds of millions of years, since before mammals existed, since before the first creatures crawled onto land, since sleep first evolved in the ancient oceans as a way for nervous systems to rest and restore themselves. Just breathe. Just rest. Just let the neurons do their work, firing and quieting in patterns refined over evolutionary time, creating and dissolving the temporary configurations that constitute your thoughts, carrying you gently, inevitably, down into the soft darkness of sleep. Your brain is a time machine, not in the science fiction sense of traveling backward or forward through time, but in the profound sense that it contains the past, preserves it, makes it present. Every experience that shaped you, every skill you've learned, every face you recognize, every moment you treasure, all of it is stored somehow in the physical structure of your brain, encoded in patterns of synaptic connections that were strengthened or weakened by experience, written into the very architecture of your neural networks. Memory is perhaps the most mysterious and fascinating aspect of brain function. It seems so simple, so obvious, this ability to remember. Yet the mechanisms underlying it are extraordinarily complex, still not fully understood despite decades of intensive research. Memory is not a single thing, but many different systems, many different types of remembering, each supported by different brain regions, each with different properties and limitations. Episodic memory is your autobiographical memory, your memory of specific events and experiences from your own life. Your first day of school, your wedding day, what you had for breakfast this morning. Each of these memories is an episode, a specific moment in time, and remembering them involves reconstructing that moment, reactivating a pattern of neural activity similar to the one that occurred during the original experience. But this reconstruction is never perfect, never a faithful replay like watching a video recording. It's more like assembling a jigsaw puzzle from pieces that don't quite fit, filling in gaps with plausible details, influenced by your current state, your expectations, your beliefs, even suggestions from other people. This is why memory is so unreliable, why eyewitness testimony is often wrong, why siblings can remember the same childhood event in completely contradictory ways, why false memories can feel absolutely, convincingly real. Your brain doesn't store experiences like a video camera records scenes. It extracts the meaning, the gist, the essential elements, and stores those, then reconstructs the details during retrieval, often inventing plausible details that seem right even if they never actually happened. Elizabeth Loftus, a psychologist who has spent decades studying memory, has shown how easy it is to implant false memories simply through suggestion, through leading questions, through exposing people to misinformation after an event. Memory is creative, constructive, more like a storyteller than a recorder, and like all storytellers, it sometimes embellishes, simplifies, or invents details to make the narrative coherent and compelling. Episodic memory depends heavily on the hippocampus, that seahorse-shaped structure deep in the temporal lobe, and on surrounding regions collectively called the medial temporal lobe. We know this from cases of amnesia following hippocampal damage. The most famous case is a patient known by his initials, HM, who had most of his medial temporal lobes surgically removed in 1953 to treat severe, debilitating epilepsy that wasn't responding to any other treatment. The surgery stopped the seizures but left HM with profound amnesia. He could no longer form new episodic memories. He would read the same magazine repeatedly, each time experiencing it as new, with no recognition that he'd read it before. He would meet someone, have a conversation, and 5 minutes later have no memory of having met them. He lived in a perpetual present, unable to remember anything that happened to him after the surgery. His last clear memories were from a few years before the operation. After that, every day was new, every moment forgotten almost as soon as it passed, leaving no trace, no record, nothing. Yet HM could still learn new skills. Researchers taught him to trace the outline of a star while looking only at his hand's reflection in a mirror, a difficult task requiring precise hand-eye coordination. Over several days, HM's performance improved dramatically, showing clear learning. But each day, when asked if he'd done the task before, he would say no, he had no memory of it, even though his hands clearly knew what to do. This revealed that procedural memory, the memory of how to do things, depends on different brain regions than episodic memory and can function independently. Procedural memory, also called implicit or non-declarative memory, includes motor skills like riding a bike, playing a musical instrument, typing on a keyboard, but also perceptual skills like reading mirror-reverse text, and even cognitive skills like solving certain types of puzzles. These memories are stored primarily in the cerebellum, basal ganglia, and motor cortex, regions involved in planning and executing movements. Once learned, procedural memories are remarkably durable, persisting for years or decades even without practice. It's true that you never forget how to ride a bike, or at least the forgetting is much slower than for most other types of memory. Semantic memory is your general knowledge about the world, facts, concepts, vocabulary, everything you know but can't trace to a specific learning experience. You know that Paris is the capital of France, that water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius, that dogs are mammals, that triangles have 3 sides. But you probably can't remember when or where you learned these facts. They've become decontextualized, separated from the episodic memories of learning them, stored as abstract knowledge. Semantic memory seems to depend on widespread regions of the cortex, with different categories of knowledge activating different areas. Knowledge about living things tends to activate temporal lobe regions. Knowledge about tools and manipulable objects tends to activate areas near motor cortex. Knowledge about abstract concepts activates still other regions. The brain organizes semantic knowledge in networks of related concepts, so activating one concept automatically activates related concepts, which is why thinking about cats makes it easier to subsequently recognize or produce the word dog, because they're closely connected in your semantic network, both members of the category pets or mammals or four-legged animals. Working memory is different from all of these. It's not about storing information for the long term, but about holding information in mind temporarily while you work with it, manipulate it, use it to guide behavior. Remembering a phone number long enough to dial it, doing mental arithmetic, following a complex sentence, and keeping track of who did what to whom, playing chess and considering different possible moves. All of these require working memory. Working memory has very limited capacity. Most people can hold about 7 items in working memory at once. Give or take 2, which is why phone numbers without area codes are typically 7 digits. Why social security numbers are broken into chunks of 3, 2, and 4 digits to make them easier to remember. Working memory depends primarily on the prefrontal cortex, the frontmost part of the brain, which maintains information through sustained neural activity. Neurons literally continuing to fire to keep information active while you're using it. And as you drift towards sleep now, as consciousness becomes less focused and more diffuse, your brain is actually working hard on memory consolidation, on transferring information from temporary storage to more permanent storage, from the hippocampus to the cortex. During sleep, particularly during slow-wave sleep, that deepest stage of sleep, the brain replays experiences from the day, strengthening important memories and weakening or pruning less important ones. The hippocampus communicates with the cortex, gradually transferring memories, integrating new experiences with existing knowledge, making connections between today's learning and everything you already know. This is why sleep is so important for learning, for memory, for academic performance, and skill acquisition. Students who sleep after studying perform better on tests than students who stay awake the same amount of time. Sleep after motor practice improves physical skills, whether you're learning to play piano, shoot free throws, or perform surgery. Sleep after emotional experiences helps process and integrate feelings, reducing the emotional intensity while preserving the memory itself. While you sleep, your brain is actively learning, actively organizing, actively making sense of the day's experiences, doing work that can only happen when waking consciousness releases its grip and allows different neural patterns to emerge. So as you rest now, as you feel yourself sinking deeper into comfort and relaxation, know that you're not wasting time. You're allowing your brain to perform essential work, consolidating the day's memories, strengthening what matters, letting go of what doesn't, organizing information, making connections, integrating new knowledge with old. Every moment you spend sleeping is a moment your brain spends becoming more organized, more knowledgeable, more capable, more integrated, more fully yourself. Let that be permission to relax completely, to let go of any guilt about sleeping, any sense that you should be doing something else. Sleep is not passive. It's active, essential, productive in its own way. Your brain needs this time. Your memories need this time. You need this time. And it's okay to take it, to claim it, to surrender to it fully and without reservation. Sink deeper now. Let the day's experiences settle into their proper places. Let memories consolidate and organize themselves without your conscious involvement. And let yourself rest too, giving your brain the space and time it needs to do its nightly work, weaving the day's threads into the larger tapestry of your life, creating continuity and meaning from the chaos of experience. Deep in the center of your brain, beneath the cortex with its rational thoughts and careful planning, beneath even the language centers that let you name and describe what you feel, lie ancient structures that generate and process emotion. The amygdala, the hippocampus, the hypothalamus, parts of the thalamus and basal ganglia, collectively called the limbic system, create the emotional tone of your experience, the feelings that color every moment of consciousness, that motivate behavior, that make life feel meaningful rather than just a series of abstract calculations. The amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure, one in each hemisphere tucked deep in the temporal lobe, is particularly important for fear and anxiety, for detecting threats in the environment and triggering appropriate defensive responses. The amygdala acts as an alarm system, constantly scanning for danger, always vigilant, ready to trigger the fight-or-flight response that has kept animals, including humans, alive for millions of years. When the amygdala detects danger, whether real or merely perceived as dangerous, it activates the sympathetic nervous system, that branch of the autonomic nervous system responsible for arousal and mobilization. Your heart rate increases, pumping more blood to muscles. Your breathing becomes faster and deeper, providing more oxygen. Your pupils dilate, improving vision. Stress hormones flood your bloodstream, cortisol and adrenaline, preparing your body to fight or flee, to respond with maximum intensity to the threat. This response is fast, automatic, unconscious. The amygdala can trigger fear before the cortex even knows what's happening, before conscious awareness catches up. You can jump at a sudden loud noise before you've consciously identified the sound as harmless. You can feel your heart racing from a perceived social threat, a critical comment, or harsh look, even though intellectually you know there's no physical danger. The amygdala doesn't distinguish between physical and psychological threats. It responds to anything that signals potential harm, activating the same ancient survival mechanisms regardless. This hair-trigger fear system made perfect sense in the ancestral environment, where threats were often immediate and physical. A rustling in the grass might be wind, or it might be a predator. Better to jump at 100 false alarms than fail to respond to one real danger. Better to be hyper-vigilant, oversensitive, overly cautious. The cost of a false positive is wasted energy. The cost of a false negative is death. But in the modern world, where most of the threats we face are social, psychological, or financial rather than physical, this hair-trigger alarm system can become a problem. The amygdala can't tell the difference between a lion in the grass and a difficult email from your boss. It responds the same way to both, flooding your body with stress hormones, creating anxiety that's disproportionate to the actual danger, wearing down your body and mind with constant activation of systems designed for brief emergencies. Over time, chronic stress can actually damage the brain. Sustained high levels of cortisol, that primary stress hormone, can impair memory formation, making it harder to learn new things and to remember recent experiences. It can even cause the hippocampus to shrink, actually reducing the physical size of this crucial structure. Chronic anxiety can lead to depression, to sleep problems that further impair cognitive function, to weakened immune response making you more susceptible to illness, all because an ancient alarm system designed for occasional acute threats is being activated constantly, chronically, by the psychological stressors of modern life. But the limbic system doesn't only generate negative emotions. The nucleus accumbens, part of the basal ganglia deep in the forebrain, is central to the experience of pleasure, reward, and motivation. When you eat something delicious, when you win a game or succeed at a challenge, when you receive a compliment or recognition, when you connect with someone you love, the nucleus accumbens releases dopamine, creating a feeling of satisfaction and pleasure that reinforces the behavior, making you more likely to seek similar experiences in the future, forming the basis of all learning through reward. This reward system drove your ancestors to find food when hungry, to seek water when thirsty, to find mates and reproduce, to form social bonds that provided protection and cooperation. Without the pleasure system, without the ability to feel reward, survival would have been impossible. The things necessary for survival and reproduction had to feel good, had to be intrinsically motivating, or our ancestors wouldn't have bothered to do them. But in the modern world, this ancient reward system can be hijacked by artificial superstimuli, by things that trigger dopamine release far more intensely than anything in the ancestral environment. Drugs of abuse, cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, work largely by flooding dopamine synapses, creating feelings of euphoria far beyond anything evolution prepared the brain for. But even legal, socially acceptable things can exploit the reward system in problematic ways. Gambling, video games, social media with its likes and comments and endless scroll, junk food engineered to be irresistibly palatable, pornography. All of these can create compulsive behavior by triggering reward circuits without the natural limits and consequences that shaped the system's evolution. The prefrontal cortex, the most recently evolved part of the brain, the part that expanded most dramatically in human evolution, helps regulate emotion, applying conscious control and long-term planning to override or modulate the automatic responses of the limbic system. When you feel angry but choose not to lash out, when you feel afraid but push through anyway, when you delay gratification for a larger goal, resist temptation, maintain focus on a difficult task, that's your prefrontal cortex at work, using cognitive control to shape behavior according to your values and goals rather than simply following immediate impulses. But this regulation requires effort and mental energy. The prefrontal cortex is metabolically expensive to run, demanding enormous amounts of glucose and oxygen. When you're tired, stressed, or mentally depleted, the prefrontal cortex functions less effectively, and emotional regulation becomes harder. This is why you're more irritable when you're sleep-deprived, why you make worse decisions when you're stressed, why willpower feels like a limited resource that gets used up over the course of the day. Sleep restores prefrontal function. It replenishes the neurochemical resources needed for cognitive control and emotional regulation. This is one reason why problems often feel more manageable in the morning after a good night's sleep. The problems haven't changed. The difficult email is still there. The conflict with a friend hasn't resolved itself. But your ability to manage your emotional response, to think clearly, to plan and problem solve rather than simply react, has improved dramatically. And right now, as you relax, as you consciously choose to let go of the day's concerns and stresses, you're giving your emotional systems permission to rest. The amygdala can stop scanning for threats. There are no threats here, in this quiet moment, in this safe place. The stress response can wind down. Cortisol levels can drop. Your nervous system can shift from sympathetic activation, that fight or flight state, to parasympathetic dominance, the rest and digest state that promotes healing and restoration. You don't have to force this shift. You can't force it. But you can allow it by creating the right conditions, by lying still, by breathing slowly and deeply, by directing your attention away from worries and toward peaceful thoughts or neutral sensations, by consciously relaxing your muscles, letting tension drain away. These simple actions signal to your brain that it's safe, that this is a time for rest and recovery, not vigilance and defense. Feel your heart rate gradually slowing. Feel the tension draining from your shoulders, your jaw, your hands. Feel your breathing becoming deeper, smoother, more automatic, less something you're doing and more something that's happening to you. These are signs that your body is responding, that your emotional brain is calming, that the transition towards sleep is proceeding naturally and successfully. You are safe. Right now, in this moment, there is truly no danger. Your ancient alarm systems, your amygdala and stress response, can rest. Your body can shift its energy from defense and mobilization to repair and restoration. Your mind can drift away from vigilance and worry toward the softer, quieter states that precede sleep. And you can surrender to this process, trusting that when you wake, you'll be restored, refreshed, better able to handle whatever challenges tomorrow brings. But that's tomorrow. Right now, there's just this, the soft darkness, the comfortable stillness, the gentle drift towards sleep. Nothing else matters. Nothing else is required of you. Just breathe. Just rest. Just let yourself be held by the darkness, safe and still, and drifting ever deeper into peace. What is consciousness? How does the brain, this physical organ made of cells and chemicals, give rise to subjective experience, to qualia, to the felt sense of being someone, to the inner world of thoughts and feelings and perceptions? This is sometimes called the hard problem of consciousness, and it's one of the deepest questions in neuroscience, philosophy, cognitive science, all of human inquiry. We've made enormous progress in understanding the brain, in mapping its structures and functions, but consciousness itself remains mysterious, perhaps the greatest remaining mystery in all of science. We don't have a complete answer to how consciousness arises from mere matter. We may never have one. The problem might be fundamentally unsolvable, or it might require insights we can't currently imagine, conceptual breakthroughs we can't predict. But we do know some things. We know that consciousness depends on certain patterns of brain activity, particularly in the cortex and thalamus. Damage to these regions can impair or eliminate consciousness, while damage to other regions, like the cerebellum, which contains more neurons than the rest of the brain combined, generally doesn't affect conscious experience at all. This suggests consciousness isn't just about having a lot of neurons, but about specific patterns of organization, specific types of connectivity, and information integration. Consciousness also depends on communication, on different brain regions talking to each other, creating unified experience from disparate inputs. Your visual cortex processes shapes and colors in the occipital lobe at the back of your brain. Your auditory cortex processes sounds in the temporal lobe on the side. Your somatosensory cortex processes touch and pain in the parietal lobe on top. But somehow, all these separate streams of processing are woven together into a single coherent experience of the present moment. You don't see shapes in one place and hear sounds somewhere else. You experience them together, unified, as parts of a single world, your world, the world as it appears to you. This binding problem, how the brain creates unity from multiplicity, remains one of the deepest mysteries of consciousness. There's no single place where it all comes together, no Cartesian theater where everything is displayed, no homunculus sitting in a control room watching screens and pulling levers. Instead, consciousness seems to be distributed, emerging from the coordinated activity of billions of neurons across many brain regions, none of which is individually conscious, but which collectively create the phenomenon of awareness, of experience, of you. It's an emergent property, like wetness emerges from water molecules or life emerges from complex chemistry, something that appears at a higher level of organization that isn't present in the individual components. And consciousness isn't constant or uniform. It fluctuates throughout the day, waxing and waning with arousal levels, becoming sharp and focused during demanding tasks, fragmenting into mind-wandering and daydreaming during idle moments, dissolving entirely in deep sleep. Right now, as you rest and listen to these words, your consciousness is already changing, already becoming less focused, less tightly organized, more dreamlike, more fluid, as the transition to sleep begins. During waking consciousness, activity in what's called the default mode network, a set of brain regions including the medial prefrontal cortex and posterior cingulate cortex, creates the sense of self, the feeling of being someone with a continuous identity, with a past that you remember and a future you can imagine, with preferences and goals and a coherent narrative about who you are. This network is active when you're not focused on external tasks, when your mind is wandering, when you're thinking about yourself, your life, your relationships, your place in the world. But as you fall asleep, as consciousness transitions from waking to dreaming to deep sleep, activity in the default mode network decreases. The sense of self becomes less stable, less consistent, less clearly defined. This is why dreams often feel strange, why impossible things happen in dreams and you don't question them, why you can sometimes not even recognize that you're the protagonist of your own dream. The self-monitoring, reality-checking functions of waking consciousness have gone offline, allowing the dream to unfold without the constraints of plausibility or consistency that waking consciousness enforces. In deep sleep, in stage 3 non-REM sleep with its slow waves sweeping across the cortex, consciousness essentially vanishes entirely. There are no dreams in deep sleep, or if there are, they're so fragmentary and vague that you don't remember them. They leave no trace. No thoughts, no sense of self, no awareness of time passing. Hours can go by in what feels like an instant, or what would feel like an instant if you were experiencing anything at all, which you're not. You simply cease to exist as an experiencing subject, and then you return, upon waking, with no memory of the gap, no sense of discontinuity, as if no time had passed at all, even though hours have gone by. This daily dissolution of consciousness is one of the strangest, most profound aspects of being human. Every single night, you die a small death, your subjective experience vanishing completely, the sense of self dissolving, the continuous stream of consciousness interrupted. And every morning you're reborn, your sense of self reconstituting itself from the same neural patterns that existed before, using the same memories and beliefs and personality traits, creating the illusion of continuity across the gap of unconsciousness. But it is an illusion. The you who wakes up is not, strictly speaking, the same as the you who fell asleep, any more than the flame of a candle in the morning is the same flame that burned the night before. It's been extinguished and rekindled, using the same materials, following the same patterns, but not literally continuous. Consciousness is a process, not a thing, and like all processes, it can start and stop, arise and dissolve. But this dissolution is necessary. Consciousness is metabolically expensive, demanding enormous resources. The brain needs time offline, time without the constant demands of maintaining awareness, processing sensory input, generating thoughts and decisions, monitoring and regulating itself. Sleep is when the brain can perform essential maintenance, clearing out metabolic waste products through the glymphatic system, pruning unnecessary synaptic connections while strengthening important ones, consolidating memories, restoring neurotransmitter balance, allowing neurons to rest and recover from the day's demands. You can't skip this process without serious consequences. Even a single night of sleep deprivation impairs cognitive function, emotional regulation, immune response, and metabolic health. After several days without sleep, people begin to hallucinate, to lose touch with reality, to experience something resembling temporary psychosis. After prolonged sleep deprivation, measured in weeks in animal studies, death follows. Sleep isn't optional or merely pleasant. It's as essential to survival as food or water, as breathing or maintaining body temperature. So as you feel consciousness starting to slip away now, as thoughts become less coherent and more dreamlike, as the boundary between your inner world and the external environment starts to blur and fade, don't fight it. Don't try to maintain alertness or clarity. This is exactly what should happen. This is your brain preparing for the essential work of sleep, letting go of the daytime mode of consciousness, allowing different patterns of activity to emerge, patterns that will restore and refresh and prepare you for tomorrow. Let yourself dissolve. Let the sense of self become less solid, less defined, less important. Let the distinction between internal and external, between thought and perception, between memory and imagination, all of it can blur and merge. You're not losing yourself. You're just entering a different state, a necessary state, a state where consciousness rests and the brain does different but equally important work. In a few hours, you'll return. Consciousness will reconstitute itself almost magically, assembling from neural activity. The self will reassemble from memories and patterns, and you'll wake feeling restored, refreshed, renewed. But for now, let it all go. Let consciousness fade like a distant light growing dimmer. Let awareness narrow and contract and finally dissolve entirely. Let the busy, thinking, worrying, planning, remembering mind finally rest in the peaceful darkness of sleep. Sleep is not a simple off state, not merely the absence of waking. It's a complex, highly organized, active process with distinct stages, each serving different functions, each characterized by different patterns of brain activity. When you first fall asleep, you enter what's called stage 1 of non-REM sleep, a brief transition period lasting usually just a few minutes, where consciousness begins to fragment, where you're not quite awake, but not fully asleep either, a twilight state where thoughts become strange and disconnected, where you might experience hypnagogic hallucinations, those vivid images or sensations that sometimes occur right at the edge of sleep. Then you descend into stage 2, a somewhat deeper sleep marked by characteristic patterns of brain activity called sleep spindles and K-complexes visible on EEG recordings. Sleep spindles are brief bursts of brain activity, rapid oscillations that may be related to memory consolidation, to the brain replaying and strengthening the day's experiences. K-complexes are large, sudden waves that might serve to protect sleep, to keep you asleep despite environmental disturbances. You spend about half your total sleeping time in stage 2, making it the dominant stage of sleep in terms of duration. Next comes stage 3, slow-wave sleep or deep sleep, the deepest stage of non-REM sleep. Here, brain activity slows dramatically, producing large, slow waves that sweep across the cortex in synchronized patterns, delta waves oscillating at less than 4 Hz, much slower than the faster beta and gamma waves of waking consciousness. This is when the brain does its most intensive restorative work, clearing metabolic waste through the glymphatic system, which is much more active during sleep than waking, strengthening immune function, releasing growth hormone that promotes tissue repair, consolidating memories by transferring them from hippocampus to cortex. It's very difficult to wake someone from slow-wave sleep. If you manage it, they'll be severely groggy and confused, experiencing what's called sleep inertia that can take 15 or 20 minutes to fully clear, stumbling around, unable to think clearly, sometimes not even knowing where they are or what day it is. This is the sleep your brain needs most urgently. When you're sleep deprived, your brain compensates by spending more time in slow-wave sleep on subsequent nights, prioritizing this essential restorative stage, sometimes called recovery sleep. After slow-wave sleep, you rise back through lighter stages and then enter REM sleep, named for the rapid eye movements that occurred during this stage, your eyes darting back and forth beneath closed lids as if watching something. Though whether this corresponds to dream content is debated. REM sleep is paradoxical. Your brain is highly active, almost as active as when you're fully awake, burning almost as much glucose and oxygen, generating fast, desynchronized waves similar to waking patterns. And yet you're deeply asleep, difficult to wake, and your body is paralyzed, temporarily unable to move except for your eyes and your breathing muscles. This paralysis is called REM atonia, and it's protective. During REM sleep, you dream vividly, intensely, often emotionally. And if your body could move, you would act out your dreams, potentially injuring yourself or your bed partner. In rare sleep disorders where this paralysis mechanism fails, in REM sleep behavior disorder, people do act out dreams, sometimes violently, sometimes dangerously, punching, kicking, leaping out of bed, requiring treatment to prevent harm. Dreams during REM sleep are typically bizarre, impossible, emotionally charged, and visually vivid. You might fly or fall. You might meet people who are dead or who somehow combine features of multiple people you know. You might find yourself back in childhood or in completely imaginary places. The laws of physics don't apply. Time doesn't work normally. And yet, in the moment, in the dream, it all seems reasonable, seems real, because the parts of your brain that normally check for consistency and plausibility are offline, allowing the dream to unfold unchecked. Why do we dream? What function, if any, do dreams serve? This question has fascinated humans for millennia, inspiring countless theories, from ancient beliefs that dreams were messages from gods to Freud's theory that they represented wish fulfillment to modern neuroscientific theories. We still don't have a definitive answer, though we have several plausible hypotheses. Dreams may help process emotions, working through difficult feelings in a safe, simulated environment where you can experience fear or anger or sadness without real-world consequences. They may consolidate memories, replaying experiences and integrating them into existing knowledge structures, strengthening important connections and pruning unimportant ones. They may support creativity and problem-solving, allowing novel combinations of ideas that would be suppressed by the logical constraints of waking thought. Or dreams may serve multiple functions simultaneously, being simultaneously about emotional processing and memory consolidation and creative exploration. Or, some researchers argue, dreams may be largely epiphenomenal, a byproduct of random neural activity during REM sleep, the cortex trying to make sense of noise, creating narratives from meaningless patterns, much like you can see faces in clouds or hear words in random sounds. The brain is a pattern recognition machine, constantly trying to find meaning, and it may continue this activity even during sleep, creating the strange, surreal experiences we call dreams. Whatever their ultimate purpose or lack thereof, dreams are a universal human experience, occurring every night whether you remember them or not, emerging from the same neural activity regardless of culture, language, or personal beliefs. And most dreams are forgotten, vanishing from memory within minutes or seconds of waking unless you deliberately rehearse them, write them down, or wake during or immediately after the dream itself. After each REM period, the cycle repeats. You descend back through non-REM stages, spending time in lighter sleep, then perhaps entering slow-wave sleep again, then rising back to REM. The cycle takes roughly 90 to 110 minutes, varying somewhat between people and across the night. Early cycles contain more slow-wave sleep, that deep restorative sleep, while later cycles contain more REM sleep, more dreaming, which is why you often wake from a dream in the morning, why the dreams you remember tend to be from the end of the night just before waking. This cyclical structure of sleep is ancient, present in all mammals and birds, probably in many other vertebrates, refined over hundreds of millions of years of evolution. Each stage serves essential functions, functions that can't be eliminated or dramatically reduced without serious consequences. When researchers selectively deprive animals of REM sleep, allowing them to sleep but waking them every time they enter REM, the animals eventually die, showing that REM serves vital purposes we still don't fully understand, purposes so important that their absence is ultimately fatal. And right now, your brain is preparing to enter this ancient, essential cycle. Waking consciousness is fading. Your sensory systems are beginning to shut down, your thalamus starting to gate incoming signals, blocking sensory information from reaching the cortex, allowing you to disconnect from the external world. Your motor systems are relaxing, preparing for the paralysis of REM sleep. Your brain chemistry is shifting, arousal-promoting neurotransmitters decreasing, sleep-promoting systems activating. You don't have to manage any of this. You can't manage it. These are automatic processes, governed by systems older than human consciousness, older than language or culture, older than mammals, part of the deep biology we share with all sleeping creatures. The process unfolds on its own, following patterns refined over evolutionary time, carrying you through the stages of sleep without any conscious guidance or effort. Just let it happen. Let your brain do what it knows how to do, what it's been doing every night of your entire life, every night since you were born, carrying you safely through the cycles of sleep, through the dissolution and reconstitution of consciousness, through the nightly journey into dreams and deep rest and back again to waking. Trust the process. Trust your brain. And let yourself sink down, down, down into the first stage of sleep, that twilight zone where you're not quite awake and not quite asleep, where the day starts to feel distant and dreamlike, where thoughts fragment and drift and finally dissolve into the soft, welcoming darkness of sleep. And now, as we approach the end of our journey through the brain, as this hour of exploration draws to a close, let yourself descend that final distance into sleep. You've traveled far tonight, through the vast landscape of the brain, from the cellular level of neurons and synapses to the systems level of memory and emotion and consciousness. You've learned how this 3-pound organ creates your entire world, your entire experience of being alive. Your brain has been listening to these words, processing language, activating relevant knowledge, making connections, creating meaning from sounds. And simultaneously, it's been managing thousands of unconscious processes, maintaining your heartbeat and breathing, regulating body temperature, processing sensory input, generating the subtle shifts in awareness that mark the transition from waking to sleeping. It's been preparing for sleep, adjusting neurotransmitter levels, shifting from arousal to relaxation, from focused attention to diffuse awareness, from the tight organization of waking consciousness to the looser, more fluid organization of sleep. And it's almost ready now, almost ready to let go completely, to release its grip on consciousness, to allow you to descend into the restorative darkness where its nightly work can truly begin. This brain, your brain, is the most complex object in the known universe. It contains more possible states, more possible patterns of activity than there are atoms in the cosmos. And yet it's yours. It's been with you since before birth, developing in the womb from a simple neural tube into this magnificently intricate organ. It's grown and changed with you through childhood and adolescence and into adulthood, shaped by your experiences, your choices, your environment, becoming uniquely yours, the physical substrate of your personality, your memories, your very self. Treat it well. Give it the sleep it needs, the rest, the nutrition, the exercise, both the stimulation that promotes growth and the peace that allows restoration. Your brain wants to function well. It wants to serve you. It's not separate from you, not a tool you use, but the very foundation of your existence, the biological basis of consciousness, of thought, of feeling, of everything that makes you you. And right now, it's ready for sleep. The arousal systems are quiet. The default mode network is fragmenting, the sense of self becoming less solid. The thalamus is gating sensory input, disconnecting you from the external world. Consciousness is unstable, thoughts drifting, attention wandering, the boundary between waking and dreaming already blurring. This is exactly what should happen. This is your brain transitioning smoothly from one state to another, following the ancient pattern that has sustained life since nervous systems first evolved. You don't need to force anything. You don't need to try to sleep. Sleep isn't something you do. It's something that happens to you when you stop doing, when you stop trying, when you simply allow the natural process to unfold. Just let it happen. Let your brain carry you gently, inevitably, into the darkness. Trust the systems that have never failed you, that have carried you through thousands of nights, that will carry you through thousands more. Feel your breathing, slow and deep and automatic. Feel your body, heavy and relaxed, supported by the surface beneath you. Feel your mind drifting, losing coherence, thoughts becoming strange and dreamlike. This is the transition. This is the letting go. This is the soft descent into sleep. And in a moment, or perhaps it's already happened, you'll lose awareness entirely. Consciousness will dissolve. The stream of thoughts will cease. And your brain will continue its work, cycling through stages, dreaming and processing and restoring, doing the essential work that can only happen when waking awareness releases its hold. In the morning, you'll return. Consciousness will reassemble, using the same memories, the same neural patterns, creating continuity across the gap. and you'll wake feeling restored, refreshed, your brain having done its nightly work of maintenance and consolidation, preparing you for whatever tomorrow brings. But that's tomorrow. Right now, there's only this: the darkness, the quiet, the gentle dissolution of awareness into sleep. Let it happen. Let consciousness fade. Let the magnificent, complex, 3-pound universe inside your skull finally rest. Good night. Sleep well. Sleep deeply. And let your brain do its work, restoring and renewing, healing and integrating, carrying you safely through the night, preparing you for the dawn.